That looks like my audio is off online, and you guys can't hear my audio either. You can hear it on Zoom, right? Can you? Okay, good. Okay, so let me start over. Sawadee hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group. Pat, you still can't hear me. Let me see what's going on here. You can't hear me at all?
No, I can hear you. I'm fine.
Oh,
I just wanted to read, but I have a question also.
Oh, okay. Let me just start over from my beginning to get my intro here. So, Sawadee Kap, hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 13, chapters 11 through 20. And what we're going to be doing is studying as a study group where I invite students in Zoom to be able to read one of the chapters. Then after a student reads a chapter, I will share some teachings on that. Then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to that particular chapter. You'll be able to ask your questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or by electronically raising your hand in Zoom and asking any and all questions that you like. So it looks like maybe Pat's volunteering to read this first chapter. So let me just go ahead and turn on the ability for Pat to be able to read that. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Before I start, I have a question from chapter 10 of last week. Mm-hmm. You said that you wished that people could have enlightenment for either a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes, or a couple of days so that they knew what enlightenment was. And if they knew what enlightenment was, then they would strive for enlightenment. And my question is, wouldn't that now be a craving?
No, because pursuing something, it can be a craving, but just the fact that you are working towards something doesn't mean that it's a craving, right? So it's all about how the mind pursues it. It's not the object itself. So if somebody experienced enlightenment and they're like, wow, that's amazing. I want to get back to that. And I just can't wait to get back to it. I'm going to push and push and push and chase and chase and chase. This is the mind longing, yearning to get to it, right? But you could also be like, wow, that was really impactful. Man, that was an amazing experience. Now let me make some wise decisions to work towards it, right? So it's not about whether you're pursuing enlightenment or not. It's about how the mind is either longing, yearning, and chasing for it, or are you making wise decisions to work towards it?
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And I probably use the words that I said, it would be nice or it'd be wonderful or I would be interested rather than wishing that this would be the case.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But are you interested in reading this? Yeah, go ahead.
4 means of sustaining favorable relationships. Monks, there are these 4 means of sustaining a favorable relationship. What 4? Giving, endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality. Beneficent. There are these are the 4 means of sustaining a favorable relationship. Giving endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality under diverse worldly conditions as is suitable to fit each case. These means of sustaining a favorable relationship are like the linchpin of a rolling chariot. If there were no such means of sustaining a favorable relationship, neither mother nor father would be able to obtain admiration and respect for their children. But since there exist these means of sustaining a favorable relationship, wise people respect them. Thus, they attain to greatness and are highly praised. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here, these are 4 things that the Buddha is explaining that will help you to have sustaining relationships, meaning long-term, and favorable relationships. Because this is one of the biggest challenges in the unenlightened state, is to be able to have healthy and functioning relationships where they can be sustaining, long-lasting, and there's not any discontentedness and hostility and bitterness in the relationship. So, of course, you're going to need to know the Eightfold Path. That's the core central teaching that's going to help you train your mind to be able to have all kinds of beneficial results in your day-to-day life by extinguishing all your unwholesome karma and producing only exclusively wholesome karma. And you're going to need to know right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, integrating that into your day-to-day life on a consistent, ongoing basis and tweaking that more and more and more. But then this is a teaching that's going to help you to be able to see specifically for relationships some additional teachings to really make sure you pay attention to as part of your relationship and specific to relationships. The Buddha talks about these 4 aspects of practice. And remember, what he's helping you to be able to understand is the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. He's helping you to be able to see the natural law that if you practice these 4 things, you're going to see improvements in your relationships. And ultimately, you can get to the point in your day-to-day life where all your relationships are harmonious, where you don't have bitterness and harshness and hostility or disharmony in any of your relationships whatsoever. So the first one here is he's talking about giving. This is generosity. That's the whole reason why this chapter is actually in this book, because in relationships, you're going to need to practice generosity, giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources more than is strictly required without any expectation of anything in return. That's going to help you to have sustaining and favorable relationships. That's also helping you to train your mind to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment, right? That's what we've been talking about as part of generosity all the way through your learning with me, is that yes, there's breathing mindfulness meditation that's training your mind to let go, but you need generosity as well. So that's going to help you to train your mind to let go. And you'd like to be practicing generosity with multiple people, but it's also helping you to sustain your relationships and have favorable relationships. So you need to be able to see that cause and effect. You shouldn't give just because you want a long-term relationship or you want this person to be favorable to you. But the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this cause and effect that in your relationships, whether it's your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, all these different individuals, you're going to need to practice generosity. And that's going to help train your mind, yes, to let go, but it's also going to help you to develop long-term favorable relationships, even with coworkers and neighbors and people like this. Then you're going to need to have endearing speech. This comes from the Eightfold Path of right speech. Understanding the elimination of lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. You need to know what each one of those things are and eliminate them from your practice, because each one of those are detrimental to your practice, and they're all based in craving, desire, attachment. And whenever you're making decisions through craving, desire, attachment, or anger, or hatred, or ill will, or any kind of ignorance or lack of wisdom or unknowing of true reality, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So you're going to need to eliminate lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. But then in more detail, you're going to need to practice the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, where you speak at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And you're going to need to know what each of those 5 factors are, because not only you need to know that the factor is, say, speak at the proper time, you need to know, well, what does that mean to speak at the proper time? Well, it means not to interrupt people, right? Because if you're interrupting people, this is based in your own craving. The mind is longing, yearning. You're just wanting to jump in there. You're not really listening to understand. You're just listening to jump in there and talk. If your mind is angry or frustrated or agitated, it's not the proper time to talk, because the only thing that's going to come out is anger and hostility and bitterness. Or if the other person's mind is angry or frustrated or being discontent, it's not the proper time to talk. So behind that particular factor in the 5 factors of well-spoken speech is speaking the proper time, there's 3 aspects there that you need to understand, and then you need to practice. So each one of these have certain aspects. So for example, like speaking gently, you need to know to pay attention to your tone, tempo, and word choice. This is going to allow you to then be able to structure language that is gentle. So you're going to need to practice that in all your relationships. And the ones that are going to be the most challenging are your parents, right? Your siblings, your life partner, your children. Those are going to be the most challenging ones to have that endearing speech, because that's where the deepest cravings are. That's where the deepest attachments are, where the mind is wanting this person to be a certain way. So just like we were talking, Pat, about the pursuit of enlightenment, someone could do it with craving, but you'll never get to it with that. But you could actually pursue it as a goal, objective, or interest. The same thing is true with relationships. You can have craving, desire, attachment in relationships, but you're not going to have peace and joy there. but you can also have a relationship without craving, desire, attachment. It's not the relationship itself that is the craving, desire, attachment. It's the way the mind is functioning in those relationships. So if you get to endearing speech in all of your conversations with the people that you're spending time with, this will produce sustainable and favorable relationships. And then you would like to pay attention to your conduct. This is beneficent conduct, your moral conduct, right action and right livelihood, that you're making sure that you're practicing in such a way that you're not causing any harm through your bodily actions. Because when you cause harm through your bodily actions, it's just going to come back to you. So you're going to need to understand right action and right livelihood from the Eightfold Path and understand that that's part of developing harmonious relationships, is having beneficent conduct. And then ultimately, you're going to need to be ensuring that the mind is practicing equality in your relationships. Because the unenlightened mind has that ego in there, that conceit, where the mind is having this pecking order, where you might put yourself above people in some situations and below people in other situations. This is actually detrimental to your ability to have favorable relationships. Because when you put yourself above people and you talk down to people, they're going to want to push you aside. They're not going to be interested in being around someone who's talking down to them. But if you put yourself below people and you talk up to people with such awe and admiration, those people are going to maybe consider you to have a lack of confidence or stability of mind or something like this. And it's going to be challenging for you in those relationships too. Those people might even feel like with their ego that they're going to now walk all over you, right? So you would like to be practicing equality where you see everybody is equal. And this is really important in all your relationships. And I like to point this out here, this equality that the Buddha was teaching 2,500 years ago. Because oftentimes people think, well, they see people that have been teaching in the last 50 to 100 years, or even the last 300 or 500 years. And you can see where people were degrading and diminishing maybe females, or maybe degrading and diminishing minorities in certain parts of society. But here's an individual 2,500 years ago who was teaching equality in relationships. He didn't teach to degrade and diminish anybody. He didn't teach that women were below men, or that women are above men, or that minorities should be looked at in any particular way. He was teaching equality among all beings because he understood the natural laws, and he understood that was important in order to create sustainable and favorable relationships. So if you ever hear anybody that talks about the Buddha degrading or diminishing anybody or degrading women, and there's people today who might be teaching what they're calling Buddhism, and they might be talking in a degrading and hateful and diminishing way towards a certain group of people. But that's those people. That's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught equality because that's what's actually going to produce beneficial results in your day-to-day life. That's what you're going to need in order to be able to have sustaining and favorable relationships. So these are the 4 qualities that you're going to need to practice in each of your relationships. In this next part here, the Buddha is just going into more details, helping you to be able to understand how important it is to practice these 4 qualities in terms of getting to these sustainable and favorable relationships. And he uses this term oftentimes like a linchpin of a rolling chariot. The linchpin is what holds it all together, right? You have the chariot and you have the horse that's holding, that are moving together based on the power of the horse. Well, the thing that's holding it together is the linchpin. If you take the linchpin out, everything falls apart. So the Buddha is saying the same thing about these 4 qualities, that this is what's going to help you to be able to have these healthy, sustainable relationships. And if you take these out, it all falls apart. So where you're having difficulties in your relationships, it's important to practice these 4 things. Whether it's a parent, sibling, life partner, child, coworker, neighbor, you can look at your practice and you can see if you're having difficulties in those relationships, you're not practicing these 4 qualities. So you dial these in closer and closer, and that's what's going to help you. Then the Buddha here is talking about this relationship with a mother and father. It's really important to have healthy relationships with your mother and father. On your side, if you're capable of doing that, that's going to help you in all parts of your life. Now, oftentimes our mother and father can't have a healthy relationship with us, right? Depending on where they are in their practice and with their wisdom, they might be having difficulties and struggles. But if you can get to a point where you're having a favorable relationship with them, meaning in your mind, you don't have any bitterness and harshness and hostility towards your parents, this is going to be really helpful for you. Because if you can't have a healthy relationship towards your parents, it will be very challenging for you to have that with other people. But conversely, if you can have a healthy relationship with your parents, people that you're typically going to be the most attached to, you're going to find it very straightforward to be able to have healthy relationships with other people. So by working on that and ensuring that you have a healthy relationship there, understanding that they might not be in a place where they can have a healthy relationship with you, but within your own mind, if you can at least have gratitude for your parents, this is going to be helpful. Because obviously you're not going to agree with everything your parents do in life. There are certain expectations that you might have had at different parts of your life where your parents didn't meet those expectations and you were angry and frustrated, agitated with them. So if you get rid of those expectations and you just love them as they are unconditionally, you can get to the point where within your own mind, you can at least have gratitude for your parents, that you're able to have this life coming into the human realm and now have the ability to now make your way to enlightenment. So if you use these particular 4 aspects that the Buddha is teaching here in your relationships with your parents, that can improve your relationship there. And then that'll make it easier for you to have healthy relationships in other situations. Because, for example, as a male, until I learned how to have a healthy relationship with my mother, I was never able to have a healthy relationship with a life partner, right? Because I have female life partner, right? And until I was able to have a healthy relationship with my father, I was never really able to have 100% healthy relationships with males in my life either, right? So by having a healthy relationship with these 2 individuals, it will actually help you to learn how to have healthy relationships with others as well. Because typically your mother and father, they're not going to turn away from you when you have certain difficulties and struggles in your day-to-day life. They can, but they don't typically. But these friends or these neighbors, if you make a 1 mistake or 2 or 3 mistakes in the relationship, they could easily, push you away and move on. Where with this mother and father, you can really practice and practice and practice, and you can stumble over your feet and you can make mistakes. And there's the ability for them to overlook that. And now you can really hone your ability to practice wise decision making in your relationship with your mother and father. And now when you've learned how to have healthy relationships there, now you'll be better in these other relationships where you don't necessarily get repeated opportunities to be able to make mistakes. So the Buddha teaches you to have respect and gratitude towards your parents, because these are the individuals that brought you into this world, and they helped you to at least sustain your life to a certain degree where now you're an adult and you can make wise decisions for yourself. So of course, we didn't agree 100% with what our parents did, but they gave us food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, and perhaps even the ability to get an education, where now we're a sustaining adult where we can sustain our own life. And you aren't going to agree with your parents. And maybe your parents even did things like physically abused you or sexually abused you. But at least if you can get to the point where you have gratitude for the fact that you had this life and this ability to now come into the world and get to enlightenment, that's a good place to be. And it doesn't mean you're going to have a long-term sustainable relationship. Some of these parents that have done things that are really, really unwise, you might not ever see that parent ever again. You might have chosen that you're never going to go around that person ever again. But at least within your own mind, if you can get rid of all the anger and hostility and bitterness, and you can at least be sitting with this gratitude towards your parents, even though you might not ever see them again, this is going to help your mind to become more liberated. Because as long as you have anger and hatred and ill will towards your parents, your mind's not going to be liberated, and you're not going to be able to experience the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 11 of volume 13. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
We just have a question on the word of beneficent. Is it the same as beneficial, or is it has a different meaning?
Yeah, it's just another word that represents the same thing, beneficial conduct. So the way that you might think about this is moral conduct, good, wholesome moral conduct. And here the word beneficent is being used.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now I'm going to move to the next chapter because I don't see any questions anywhere else. This is chapter 12. Someone would like to read this?
I can read it.
Okay. Go ahead, Vibhav.
3 things prescribed by the wise. monks, there are these three things prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. What three? Giving is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. The going forth is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. Attending upon one's mother and father is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. These three things are prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. Wholesome people will prescribe giving, harmlessness, mental discipline, and mental restraint, service to one's mother and father, and to the peaceful practitioners of the spiritual life. These are the deeds of the good which the wise person should pursue. The noble one possessed of vision goes to a heavenly world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here we've got essentially some of the similar things that we were just talking about, but a little bit additional things as well. So these are three things that the Buddha is saying that are prescribed by the wise. Whenever he's talking about the wise, he's talking about people who are wise to the natural law of karma, who are wise to the natural laws of existence. If you understand these natural laws and the natural law of karma, then you'll know what is wise and what is unwise. So giving, of course, generosity, that's very wise. So a wholesome person that understands that eliminating selfishness is part of the path to enlightenment. As long as you have that stain of selfishness, the mind's not going to be bright and cheerful, right? The mind's going to be selfish. So there needs to be a certain practice of generosity. So the wise is going to essentially agree with that or prescribe that, or wholesome persons are going to prescribe that. Going forth is prescribed by the wise. Going forth means to become ordained. During the lifetime of the Buddha, the way that people were typically getting to enlightenment was through ordination. That the household practitioners, while they were learning and practicing to a certain degree, they found it difficult to be able to get to enlightenment in large numbers. There were still people who got to enlightenment as a household practitioner during the lifetime of the Buddha, but it wasn't as significant as it could be today. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, household practitioners were just busy trying to sustain their life, carrying water from the well, making clothes, planting and growing crops and food, where today we've systematized all these things, and it's really easy for us to get those things. We have so much time in our life as a household practitioner that oftentimes people fill it up with unbeneficial things, like, endless hours of searching social media or YouTube videos or things of this nature, where you can actually shrink that down to a certain degree and provide more time and effort for you to be able to learn the teachings, meditate, and train your mind. So here, of course, going forth is prescribed by the wise, because that's essentially like stepping towards enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha. Where I would say today, getting to enlightenment as a household practitioner is actually more likely than during the lifetime of the Buddha, because the teachings are now shining in the world, available for people to be able to fully learn them and understand them. And household practitioners have the ability, because they have time available that they didn't have during the lifetime of the Buddha. So going forth, while it definitely is prescribed by the wise, I would even say here that we could now look at this as learning and practicing and growing on the path to enlightenment is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people, because that's essentially what the Buddha is talking about here. But he's just talking about going forth, because being in the household life wasn't necessarily ideal to get to enlightenment during his lifetime. So we might even think about this as, going forth, meaning going forth on the path to enlightenment, learning and growing and developing on the path to enlightenment. And then attending upon one's mother and father is prescribed by the wise, because by taking care of your mother and father, that's going to help bubble up that generosity. It's going to help bubble up that loving kindness and compassion. And then that's going to spill over into other parts of your life, where other relationships, you'll be able to practice those same things as well. So these are three qualities that are wise to practice. And then ultimately the Buddha brings this together, where he talks about giving, harmlessness, where you guys have seen that before, because practicing harmfulness, where you're causing harm to other beings, that harm is just going to come back to you. So you need to get to the point where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to any beings whatsoever. Mental discipline is having control over your mind, where your mind is disciplined and you're able to control it. Because when the mind's angry and frustrated, or having stress or anxiety or guilt or shame or fear, or any of these other feelings, you don't have control over the mind in that situation. So a wholesome person, a wise person, is going to understand that discipline of the mind is important. And what comes along with that, and where the mind becomes disciplined, is having this mental restraint, the ability to pull your mind back. Because Your mindfulness or awareness of mind is going to help you to see that the mind is longing, yearning, and craving for something. But now with that mental restraint, you're able to pull it back, right? Where you're not just chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing. And you need to be able to see that chase that the mind's doing and be able to restrain it and pull it back. And then, of course, service to one's mother and father, which we've already talked about. And then to the peaceful practitioners, the spiritual life, right? That this is the going forth into the spiritual life. And again, during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was called going forth because you're going forth into the ordained lifestyle. But we can consider that just going forth on the path to enlightenment, that you're walking forward towards this development of the mind. And now he says, these are deeds of the good which the wise person should pursue, right? Like we can see that, and we can see the cause and effect, how these things are definitely going to lead to improvement in one's mind and one's life. But then he adds this next piece, which you'll typically see when the Buddha is talking about certain aspects of the natural law and training your mind and generosity and all these other things. That first he says the noble one possessed of vision. What it means to have vision is to be able to see the path to enlightenment very clearly and be able to see the natural laws very clearly. Because in the unenlightened state, when you lack wisdom, you don't have vision. You don't have true awareness or true knowledge of the path to enlightenment and of these natural laws. So as you develop your understanding through not belief, but learning, practicing the teachings, you'll able to independently verify that they're true. And this is where you have more and more vision of being able to see the natural laws. So an individual who's a noble one is practicing the teachings closely. If they're possessed of vision, that means they have deep wisdom about the natural laws. And what the Buddha is saying here is goes to a heavenly world. Why he's saying this is because, of course, his goal is to help you to get to enlightenment. That's the ultimate goal. That's everything his teachings are guiding you to, is not to get to some afterlife that is wonderful, but instead to get to a wonderful life now, that you're gradually working towards improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. But if you fall short of that for any reason, that's where one can be reborn into the heavenly world. But that's not an ideal existence, and that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal would be to get to enlightenment in this life. But if you happen to fall short for any reason, the work that you're doing now could potentially lead to a existence in the heavenly realm. But remember, that's not ideal because those beings are still in the cycle of rebirth. They still need to get to enlightenment. They tend to be complacent because they're only experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings, and they tend to be reborn into other realms. So you still need to get out of the heavenly realm. It's not a permanent existence. This is very clear through the teachings of the Buddha. But even for people who have been taught that heaven is actually permanent, typically through the Christian Bible, you can see in the Christian Bible that heaven is not permanent either. And people have come up with this idea that heaven is permanent. But right in the Christian Bible, you can see where it talks about certain angels or certain beings, we would call them heavenly beings, that were in the heavenly realm and they were kicked out and they went into other realms. You can see it very clearly. But for some reason, people have latched onto this idea that somehow the heavenly realm is permanent, right? And that's that lack of wisdom that the mind has, even though it's very clear right there in the Bible that the heavenly realm is not permanent, which is what the Buddha teaches as well. So heavenly realm is not the goal. The goal is to get to enlightenment in this life and now be gradually working towards improvement day by day to ensure that you get to that enlightened mental state. But if you fall short for any reason, there's the potential for a heavenly rebirth, but still, that's not the ultimate goal. You're still in the cycle of rebirth. There's still work to be done, even in the heavenly realm. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 12. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we'll move to chapter 13. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha and Chris. So we'll go to Samantha and Chris. We'll come to you on the next one.
One who has trust and confidence. Monks, in 3 cases, one may be understood to have dedication and confidence. What 3? When one aspires to see those of virtuous behavior or practicing moral conduct. when one aspires to hear the good, wholesome teachings, and when one resides at home with a mind free of the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. In these three cases, one may be understood to have trust and confidence. One who aspires to see the virtuous ones, one who aspires to hear the good, wholesome teachings, one has removed the stain, who has removed the stain of selfishness, is called a person endowed with dedication.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So here, in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to have dedication, meaning dedication and commitment to your own growth and development on the path. You can't get to enlightenment through being complacent. Nobody has ever accomplished anything through complacency, right? That just sitting around doing nothing all day, this isn't going to lead to any kind of growth and development in any aspect of your life. So you're going to need dedication to be able to get to the path to enlightenment, because you're not going to need to be able to just meditate once or twice or 10 times or 20 times or 100 times or 1,000 times. You're going to need to meditate tens of thousands of times in order to get to enlightenment. That just by itself takes a lot of dedication. In order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to do some reading, right? You're going to need to read some books. That takes a lot of dedication. We've got 13 books here in our book series. You're going to need to read these more than one time. You're going to need to attend classes. You're going to need to ask questions to a teacher. You're going to need to have some dedication, right? So dedication is going to help see you through the growth and development on the path, as well as confidence. You're going to need to have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. That confidence is going to see you through, because when you're training your mind to get rid of these cravings, desires, attachments, the mind's going to experience painful feelings. You can't get to enlightenment without painful feelings. That your mind, having craving, desire, attachment, got pleasant feelings. You've got the happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria for getting that new job, or, since I just got some cameras, let's just say somebody had craving, desire, attachment for a camera, and they were so excited and happy with a new camera, right? Well, when that camera gets damaged, or when you lose that job, your mind's not getting what it wants there. It's experiencing an impermanence, and now you're going to experience painful feelings. You guys understand that, right? Well, if you're actively working to eliminate your cravings, because what I just described was, experiencing impermanence and your craving gets triggered. But if you're actively working to eliminate your cravings, you're actually training your mind to not get its conditioned pleasant feelings. And now when your mind's walking away from that craving, it's going to be very painful. So maybe we'll say use a piece of chocolate cake. This is one of my other, normal examples, right? Like you go to this restaurant, you get so excited and happy about this chocolate cake. And now you realize, oh my goodness, my mind's got a craving because I just can't stop thinking about that chocolate cake. And whenever I go past that restaurant, I just keep thinking about going to get that chocolate cake. Well, now if you choose to distance yourself from that, where you're not going into the restaurant for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, this can be very painful for the mind because the mind's not getting what it wants. Or if there's, say, a certain thing, like a certain, substance, like maybe like coffee, and you're so used to having coffee every morning, and now you choose not to have that coffee, it's going to be very painful as you're walking away from that. I talk about this as walking through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. Or I talk about this like joining the mafia, and when you leave the mafia, it's very painful. It's the same thing with these pleasant feelings, that now when you walk away from that and you're eliminating your cravings, desires, attachments, it's very painful. So you're going to need to have confidence as you're going through that pain. Because just for example, getting rid of coffee, it took multiple months for me to get rid of that coffee. And I need to have confidence that I was headed in the right direction. Or any number of other cravings that I was working to get rid of, I had to have confidence that I was headed in the right direction. I was heading to a better place. Because when you're in the fire, you might second guess yourself, right? You might turn back towards the craving to get those pleasant feelings, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But you need to have the confidence and the dedication to keep walking out of the fire. Because if you go back towards the craving to get those pleasant feelings, thinking that that's going to solve things, it actually doesn't. It just keeps the craving around for longer. So you're going to need this dedication and confidence. And the Buddha now is explaining, how do you develop that dedication and confidence? Well, you're going to need to aspire for this practice of good, wholesome moral conduct, the virtuous behavior. Because if you're working on that and improving your moral conduct, then that means you are working on craving, anger, and ignorance, those three poisons. You're working on eliminating the pollutions of the mind, because you can't get to good, wholesome moral conduct without improving the pollution of your mind. So talking about moral conduct is just kind of like a shortcut way of talking about the elimination of pollution in the mind. That we can talk about the moral conduct, but it's improving the moral conduct that's ultimately going to help you to now be able to see that, yes, you need to ultimately go back to the mind and work on eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance. You couldn't improve your moral conduct without improving the condition of the mind and its pollutions. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here, is as you're working towards that improved conduct, that's where you need dedication and confidence. When you really want to argue with your husband or wife or your children, or you just want to be harsh and bitter and hostile, you're going to need that dedication and confidence to walk away from that, improving your moral conduct, and doing that through elimination of craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind. So all of that is working together. And then in order to have that dedication and commitment, that confidence, you're going to need to aspire to hear the good, wholesome teachings, the teachings of the Buddha, because that's what's going to help you to continue to grow and develop with your moral conduct, so that you can then ultimately eliminate the pollutions of the mind, is hearing the good, wholesome teachings. So if someone was like, oh, I'll just read any old book, I will just listen to any old teacher, I will just, conform to any old thing that I'm hearing someone teaching, that's not what the Buddha is talking about. You need to be able to learn, grow, develop. You need to be able to examine, investigate the teachings. You need to be able to reflect on them, to independently verify them and practice them, knowing that you have the true teachings because you can see the truth in them through your independent verification. So you need to aspire to hear these good, wholesome teachings, because that's what's going to ultimately help you improve your moral conduct, which is ultimately going to help you to purify your mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. And then part of that as well is to now practice generosity. By practicing generosity, that's what's going to eliminate the craving in the mind, because that's what's causing the unwholesome moral conduct. That's what's allowing the harsh and bitterness in the mind to exist, where now it's coming through in your intentions, your speech, and your actions, but it's coming from the mind itself, the craving. So by practicing generosity, it's getting back to the root cause of why an individual would be practicing unwholesome moral conduct. And when you're practicing unwholesome moral conduct, it's just producing more and more unwholesome karma for you. It's producing unwholesome results in your day-to-day life where you're damaging your relationships. So here you can see how everything's coming back to the purification of the mind, and that's what ultimately is going to help you through all of these things. And ultimately, the dedication and confidence to be able to now learn and grow and develop on the path is what's going to ultimately see you through to enlightenment. And then the Buddha is now just kind of summarizing that towards the end, where he says, one who aspires to see the virtuous ones, meaning people who are wise and learning and growing and developing with individual teachers that are going to help you to understand wise decision-making in these natural laws. One who aspires to hear the good, wholesome teachings, you're going to need to know that and be able to understand the teachings. So you need to be able to hear them first, then be able to investigate them, reflect on them, and practice them. You're going to need to remove the stain of selfishness from the mind, because that's part of that craving, desire, attachment. And now this person, having dedicated time and effort to these things, the Buddha is saying this is one who's endowed with dedication, because they're really working to improve their moral conduct by listening to the wholesome teachings, and they're practicing this generosity because they understand that's the underlying cause of unwholesome moral conduct, is the craving, the anger, and the ignorance. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 13, one who has trust and confidence. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So we'll move to chapter 14. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Oh, it was Chris. That's right. Go ahead, sir.
Right.
practicing the way proper to the household practitioner. Householder, a noble disciple who possesses 4 qualities, is practicing the way proper to the household practitioner, a way that brings the attainment of fame and leads to heaven. What for? Here, householder, a noble disciple serves the community of monks with robes. He serves the community of monks with alms food. He serves the community of monks with lodgings. He serves the community of monks with medicines and provisions for the sick. Householder, a noble disciple who possesses these 4 qualities is practicing the way proper to the household practitioner, a way that leads to the attainment of fame and leads to heaven. When the wise practice the way proper for the household practitioner, they serve the virtuous monks of upright conduct with robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicine. For them, both by day and night, merit always increases. Having done excellent deeds, they pass on to the heavenly realm.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So remember, as we were talking about earlier, that household practitioners were more so restrained and having difficulties to be able to make their way to enlightenment because of just the nature of their life and being able to provide for the things that they needed to provide for in order to be able to sustain their life. So while householders can absolutely get to enlightenment, it was much more rare during the lifetime of the Buddha because they were so busy just sustaining their life. So oftentimes what the Buddha was teaching for household practitioners is how to get to this improved rebirth potentially for a future life, if someone can get to heaven and maybe get to enlightenment from that realm, or come back into the human realm and get to enlightenment in maybe a future life. This is oftentimes what was being described. But a household practitioner can absolutely get to enlightenment. It's just that they were less likely to do so during the lifetime of the Buddha because they were just so busy with so many tasks. They didn't have time to be able to listen to the teachings and train the mind through meditation and all those other things. But today, that's all been cleaned up, that through systematizing all the different things that we have and that we need to be able to sustain our life, we can more readily use that time to be able to practice and train our mind. So here, the Buddha is guiding household practitioners to practice generosity towards the ordained community, because by the ordained community becoming more and more wise, then they have the wisdom to be able to share with the household practitioners to be able to help them to improve their life. And this is the way that it was always meant to be during the lifetime of the Buddha. But we don't necessarily see that to be the case today, where sometimes there's ordained practitioners that aren't really practicing very closely. And you can see that there's household practitioners oftentimes that are actually practicing the teachings of the Buddha even more closely than ordained practitioners. So it's important to find a teacher and someone that you can have confidence and trust in to be able to guide you on the path to enlightenment. But at the same time, it's wise to make offerings to ordained practitioners if you can understand that they're either in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment or practicing for one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. The Buddha taught to make offerings to these people. But you shouldn't just go out into the world and haphazardly make offerings to anybody, because everything that the Buddha taught is based in discernment, including offerings to ordained practitioners. The benefit of making offerings to ordained practitioners isn't anything mystical or magical, that just because you made an offering to an ordained practitioner, something wonderful is going to happen. Instead, if you can see that an ordained practitioner is either in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment or practicing for one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, and you make an offering to them, now you have the opportunity to gain the wisdom that you need in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment, right? So you're going to need to be able to discern whether somebody is in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment or practicing for the realization of one of the 4 stages. And now that's what's actually going to help you, is that yes, you're practicing generosity and that's enhancing the quality of your mind to give and share, but now coming in contact with someone who has wisdom about the path, they're then going to be able to help you along the journey as well. And that's what the Buddha's created during his lifetime, is that there's this interaction between the people who were practicing the closest, which was the ordained practitioners during his lifetime, and the household practitioners who weren't really able to practice so closely because they were so busy and occupied just trying to sustain their life. But in some respects, this is actually flipped now during the lifetime of the Buddha. So you need to be very diligent to be able to look at an individual's practice if you're going to make offerings. Remember, you're not judging people and looking down on them, but you would like to practice discernment in where you make offerings and how you practice to give and share with the people around you, not just ordained practitioners, but even in your day-to-day life when you're practicing generosity as well. What the Buddha is talking about here, where he talks about this is the way that practices and attains fame and leads to heaven, that's because the mind has less craving. So upon a rebirth, that there's the potential for less craving in the mind because an individual is practicing generosity. And now there can be this rebirth where there's potentially fame or this heavenly existence is being realized. But remember, that's not the goal. The goal is to get to enlightenment in this life, not to experience fame or a heavenly existence. That's not what you're interested in. If someone is famous, okay, they're famous, but that's not the ultimate goal. The goal is to learn, grow, and develop, getting to enlightenment in this life. But should you fall short, which household practitioners frequently did during his lifetime, this is what would be experienced. And that's why the Buddha is teaching this. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, looks like Chris has a question here. Why is the word fame being used? Because of famous, being famous or well known in the community. That's what he's talking about. Okay, let's see. Do we have any questions on YouTube? I don't see any on YouTube or Facebook. All right, so let's go to chapter 15. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Pat, go ahead, sir.
Mutual support between monks, Brahmins, and householders. Monks, Brahmins, and householders are very helpful to you. They provide you with requisites of robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines in time of sickness. And you, monks, are very helpful to Brahmins and householders as you teach them the teachings that are good in their beginning, the middle, and the end, with the correct meaning and wording, and you proclaim spiritual life in its fulfillment and complete purity. Thus, monks, the spiritual life is lived with mutual support for the purpose of crossing the flood and making a complete end of discontentedness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So if you guys took any of the foundational programs with me, you guys have already learned this, but there might be people on Facebook or YouTube or on the replay that haven't actually taken any of those courses and programs with me. So I'm going to go ahead and describe this as similarly as I do in all the foundational programs. First, we'll talk about what a Brahmin is. A Brahmin today, we might describe this as a Hindu priest. This is that individuals born into a certain class, a certain part of a culture that was going on during this time frame, that they were considered to be wholesome people and holy people that could perform rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayers for the benefit of other people. And the people that were common individuals were taught that you needed to go to these people in order to pay them money in order to be able to then perform a ritual or a ceremony on your behalf. And your life was supposed to get better. But of course, this wasn't true reality. This isn't what truly worked to improve one's life, that you can't go to somebody else, pay them money, they're going to do a ceremony for you, and then your life's going to become better. That's not the way that the world works. That the Buddha was teaching this cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions, the natural law of karma, that you need to cultivate wisdom about the natural laws in order to be able to make wiser decisions. And that's what's going to produce beneficial results in your life. So oftentimes there was a lot of corruption amongst the Brahmin class, because maybe I would go to this Brahmin today and say, hey, I'm having trouble with my wife. And this person might say, oh, we need $5 to do the ceremony for you. So then the ceremony would be done and I was going to go home and life was supposed to get better. But now life doesn't get better. It's getting worse, right? So now you go back a few weeks or a few months later and say, hey, things are getting worse. I need help. Oh, it's going to be $10 for that ceremony, right? So now this kind of bred corruption and things weren't really truly improving. So these Brahmin who were doing these kinds of things, they were actually teaching a certain amount of moral conduct as well, to a certain degree, but largely they're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer. So these individuals would sometimes learn with the Buddha. So here the Buddha is talking to his ordained practitioners and saying that monks, Brahmins, and householders are very helpful to you because they provide you with the requisites of robes, alms food, lodging, and medicines in time of sickness, because they're making offerings to the ordained practitioners, the Brahmin and the householders, because they're supporting these ordained practitioners to come out of the household life and now live this life where they're cultivating wisdom. The ordained practitioners, the monks, are cultivating wisdom. So they would have the wisdom available to then help the Brahmin and householders. And you monks are very helpful to Brahmins and householders as you teach them the teachings that are good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, with the correct meaning and wording. And you proclaim the spiritual life in its fulfillment in complete purity, right? That's that mutual exchange, that mutual support that is occurring, because the students are supporting the teachers and the teachers are then supporting the students to be able to develop this life. Right? So if we're interested in having these teachings come into the world, we need to be able to support people to basically unplug from the world and no longer be pursuing a career in that type of life, but instead be dedicated to their own growth and development on the path. And as they become wiser and wiser, they then have the teachings to be able to share with the community. And this mutual support has existed since the lifetime of the Buddha. And these individuals who are stepping away from society and are supported by their students to be able to do that and cultivate wisdom and get closer and closer to enlightenment themselves, if they're practicing wisely, they would have deep appreciation and gratitude and respect for their students that are providing them this opportunity to be able to unplug from society and be able to deeply get into the teachings. And as a result, the way that they provide that gratitude back to their students is by helping them to learn the teachings that it takes to be able to get to liberation and to enlightenment. So the Buddha taught this as mutual support. So here he's saying, monks, this spiritual life is lived with mutual support for the purpose of crossing the flood and making a complete end of discontentedness. And this is the way it would happen, that the entire world could ultimately get to a point where there's no discontentedness whatsoever. It's not going to be during our lifetime, but in the future, if we do what we need to do in this lifetime, there can be the potential for the entire world to get to peace and joy. But there's going to need to always be people who unplug from society that aren't pursuing careers and businesses and things like that, but instead are working and growing in their own practice to then be able to provide support to the people who are working in jobs. You can actually get to enlightenment by having a household life, but there needs to be people in the community who aren't doing that, who are deeply practicing the teachings so that then they can actually share with the other people how to actually accomplish getting to enlightenment while they're living in a household life or while they're living in an ordained life or any of that other type of lifestyle. So there's this mutual support that the Buddha taught. Because if you can imagine the Buddha teaching certain students how to get to enlightenment, let's just say that there was, obviously during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was countless people that were getting to enlightenment. But let's just say there was 10,000 people who got to enlightenment during his lifetime. And these people were deeply practicing the teachings and they knew exactly how to get to enlightenment. But let's just say they had a business on the side and they were operating a business. Well, now, if it was a matter of helping this person get to enlightenment, a student, or operating their business, then in this situation, they would potentially focus on operating their business because that's how they're making their food. That's how they're getting their food and making money to be able to sustain their life, that they wouldn't be able to dedicate a significant portion of their time and effort and energy to helping these students because they'd be over here trying to get food through operating their business. So by unplugging from society and teachers being dedicated to their own growth and development, then also because of the offerings they're accepting from their students, now being dedicated to their students to help their students, there's this mutual support that comes into play where now they're actually motivated to be able to share the teachings with the public because they don't eat if they don't actually share the teachings with others. So the Buddha wisely set this up so that there's this mutual support, that there's not people who are just off to the side operating a business and trying to teach at the same time, because that would get very complicated and very convoluted, and that person wouldn't be able to be dedicated to truly helping the students in the way that is needed, because a teacher really needs to be available for their students in a significant way to be able to then help them throughout all the trials and tribulations that they're experiencing in their day-to-day life. So the Buddha taught this mutual support between the two groups of people. And there's generosity being practiced in both sides, that the in this case, Brahmin and householders were practicing generosity to share with the teachers or the ordained practitioners. But the ordained practitioners and teachers are also practicing generosity and now sharing the teachings with the public at no cost. That there shouldn't be any cost whatsoever for a student to be able to learn and grow and develop on the path. If somebody is having difficulties to live their life and they're struggling and having difficulties providing for their own food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, the way for those people to get out of that difficulty is to learn the wisdom of the teachings of the Buddha. But if we put a price tag on our courses and classes and things like this, those people can never get the access to the wisdom that they need to improve their life. So as a practice of generosity, loving kindness, and compassion, it would be wise for teachers to not charge. And nowadays, some teachers say, well, it's really hard for me to sustain my life because if I don't charge a price, then I don't have a way to survive, right? But this is because those teachers aren't understanding generosity and how important generosity is and how it's important for the path to enlightenment. And they need to teach their students why generosity is important so that their students will then understand why they need to practice generosity. If a teacher is having difficulties in struggling to support themselves, the answer to that isn't to put a price tag on their courses. The answer to that is to understand what generosity is actually doing to help an individual get to enlightenment, and then teach that to your students. So then your students understand that, and now they can practice generosity with you. And now you can stay open to accepting students from all across all social classes, all wealth and financial ability, that you can help people who have no ability to support you whatsoever. You can support people who have moderate ability to support you. And then you can help people who are in, higher income earners who can also support you there too. But you don't have any expectation from any of these people to support you. But instead, you just focus on helping all beings. Whereas if you put a price tag on your courses, you can't help all beings. You can only help the people that can afford to purchase your courses. And in that situation, the student isn't actually practicing generosity. So it's not helping them to get to enlightenment. If they're paying a price for a course, they're not actually practicing generosity. So therefore, it's actually not helping them as much as it could if they actually practice generosity and then learn the wisdom. So any teacher who understands the path to enlightenment, they would understand how important generosity is, and they wouldn't charge for their courses or their classes or their guidance to be able to help people in the path to enlightenment. If someone's still charging for their teachings, I would say that those people aren't actually enlightened because they don't yet have loving kindness and compassion for all beings, and they're not understanding how important generosity is for all beings to be able to practice, to be able to get to enlightenment. And they're pricing out those disadvantaged beings that aren't able to afford for the courses and the resources that they need to be able to get to enlightenment. So anybody who's a teacher who's enlightened, in my opinion, wouldn't be charging for courses or their ability to help people to be able to make their way on the path to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this. The Buddha's talking about this mutual support, which is so important to keep the teachings strong and vibrant in the world and be shared in the world in a way that countless people can get access to them. All people of society can get access to them. Okay, I'm not seeing questions anywhere. So now let's go to the next one. This is chapter 15, I think. Let me get here. Oh, it's chapter 16. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
Or worthy deeds to be undertaken with wealth. Householder, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, and noble disciple undertakes 4 worthy deeds. What for? 1. Here, householder, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, the noble disciple makes himself content and pleased and properly maintains himself in contentedness. He makes his parents content and pleased and properly maintains them in contentedness. He makes his wife and children, his slaves, workers, and servants content and pleased and properly maintains them in contentedness. He makes his friends and companions content and pleased and properly maintains them in contentedness. This is the first case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly utilized and used for the worthy cause. 2. Again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciple makes provisions against the losses that might arise from fire, floods, kings, thieves, or displeasing heirs. He makes himself secure against them. This is the second case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. 3. Again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciple makes the 5 offerings to relatives, to guests, ancestors, the king, and the deities. This is the third case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for the worthy cause. Again, the wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciple establishes an uplifting offering of alms, a donation, an offering that is heavenly, resulting in contentedness, conducive to heaven, to those ascetics and Brahmins who refrain from intoxication and heedlessness, who are settled in patience and gentleness, who tame the mind, calm the mind, and train the mind for nirvana, enlightenment. This is the fourth case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. These, householder, are the 4 worthy deeds the noble disciple undertakes with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth, righteously gained. But when anyone exhausts wealth of these 4 worthy deeds, that wealth is said to have gone to good use, to have been properly used, to have been utilized for a worthy cause. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here, within this book of generosity, the Buddha is talking in this particular discourse about how to use your wealth in a way that is beneficial and that goes to a good cause or good use. And he gives you this ordering of priority, because as you're building your wealth, you need to always be practicing generosity from the middle way, right? Because if you were to overextend yourself and you were practicing extensive amounts of generosity, you wouldn't have what you need in order to sustain your life. But if you're all the way on the other side, where you were quite selfish with the things that you have, you're experiencing selfishness. There's craving there. The mind's not in the middle. So overextending with your generosity, you're not going to have what you need. But if you're all the way on the other side, there's this selfishness that's in the mind. So you need to come to the middle where you're making wise decisions about how to practice generosity on a day-to-day basis. So the Buddha gives you these 4 priorities of how to practice your generosity to make sure that your needs are met and that you can practice this middle way. So the first one, he's talking about practicing generosity with the people that are closest to you, right? He's talking about your life partner, your children. Here he's talking about slaves, but we can think about like household workers, right? Or your employees. These are people that you would like to be practicing generosity with, because these are the people that's helping you to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish in life. If you or your life partner, your children, your employees aren't well taken care of, then you're not going to be able to continue to earn in the world. You're not going to be able to sustain your life, because these are the people that are directly supporting you to be able to accomplish what it is that you're accomplishing. So as you're accomplishing growth and development and success through financial growth and development in your day-to-day life, you're going to need to make sure that people immediately around you are well taken care of, because now as a group, you guys can continue to build your business or build your wealth or whatever it is that you're working towards. Once you've got that satisfied, then you can move on to this next category. The Buddha talks about, now that you have this wealth, that you protect it and you find ways to ensure that you've protected it against losses. So here he's talking about fire, floods, kings, thieves, or displeasing heirs. So one of the ways that they would protect their money against fire and floods during the lifetime of the Buddha is that they would need to physically protect their money, right? Because that's all they had. Right? They had gold and silver and certain material possessions. They had to protect against it. Where today, we might think about this as like insurance. Someone might choose to have insurance for their home or something other aspect of their property. And that could be a way to protect against fire and floods. But also it's protecting in terms of physical protection too. Right? And then the same thing with thieves, right? You might have a safety deposit box, or you might have a bank account or things like this. A way to think about this one with kings is the government, right? Even though our government isn't necessarily a king, there might be kings within a certain country. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, a king could potentially, barge in with their soldiers and start taking the things that you are having, right? Well, today, if there's a certain place that you live that you're required to pay taxes and you didn't pay your taxes, they could potentially start putting liens against your property, right? So you would like to make sure that you're comfortable in terms of you've taken care of the government, right? In terms of any tax obligations that you have. That way it's going to protect your wealth and you can continue to grow your wealth. Whereas if you're cheating on your taxes and you're not reporting your taxes and you're not paying your taxes, then there's the potential for the government to come in and take the things that you have. So this is the way to protect against all of these types of things. And then in terms of protecting against displeasing heirs, the way that you might do this is to have a really well-defined will, which is a document that you put in place prior to death, but then also that you communicate your will to the people around you before you actually die, so that there's no confusion during your death and that whole process, because already people's minds, if they're unenlightened, are not going to be functioning very well. Their mind's going to be unstable and shaken up, and they're going to be sorrow and grief and displeasure with the fact that you've died. But if you can communicate several years before you've ever died where your money is going to go, and multiple people know about this, now you can handle any displeasure that's happening long before you die. Because once you die, if people are kind of shocked about what it is and where you left and who you left money to and your assets to, now they're going to be fighting amongst themselves and you're not around to be able to help with that. So as a wise individual, someone who's wholesome, you would like to make sure that all of this is taken care of and smoothed out long before you die. So you could have a well-defined will, and now you could communicate this long before death so that there's no such thing as a displeasing heir, that people are well aware. Sometimes people like to make it a surprise once you've died of who you left your money to, but that's not a wise thing to do, because it's just going to create strife and grief and sorrow as the family has cravings and desires, attachments. Their anger is going to rise and it's going to be a big mess. So it's better to communicate all of this long before death. So this is the second way to protect your wealth and make sure your wealth has gone to good use. The third way that the Buddha is talking about here is he's saying noble disciple makes the 5 offerings to relatives, right? This would be like your parents, your aunts and uncles, people like this, that of course that you make sure that people have the things that they need, right? Because these are the people that are supporting you in life and have support you in life. And if you've got a relative that's really struggling, you might try to take them some food. You might try to help them with certain aspects of their life. This could be a practice of your generosity. And then any kind of guests, right? If you have guests over to your house, you would like to practice generosity with them as well. And then this part of your ancestors, this would be people that have died. So I'm not quite sure, maybe the Buddha means elders here, although that's kind of covered under relatives. I'm not quite sure what he's talking about there. He's already, talked about the king. And then also, he doesn't use this word deities much, and he doesn't really teach worshiping of deities and offerings to deities. So it's not really possible to make offerings to deities. So we might have a mix of translation here, or we might have something that's, been inserted into the teachings, because that's not really part of what the Buddha would typically teach. It's more so around, making offerings to people who live today, right? There's no worship of deities in the teachings of the Buddha. But nonetheless, there's this next group of relatives and guests that you would like to be practicing your generosity with. And this is going to help to make sure you've got all your bases covered with the people that are around you. Then lastly, this is important that he says lastly here, the last priority is essentially people who are leaving the household life to be able to go into this life of homelessness, to now be able to share with ordained practitioners and teachers. Because if you don't have all those other places covered, it doesn't make sense to be sharing with those individuals, right? The Buddha put himself as the person who's last that you share with, that you need to take care of yourself, your life partner, your children, your employees. Make sure all those people are whole so that you can continue to grow and develop in life, right? And then make sure that you've protected your wealth against fire and floods and things like that. And then your relatives and guests, make sure all those people are taken care of. And now when all of that's taken care of, okay, there's extra food, there's extra clothing, there's extra financial resources. Now you can share with the people who are cultivating their mind and training their mind to get to enlightenment, because you're now prepared to be able to do that. So this last group of people are the people who is actually sharing the teachings to be able to help others to get to enlightenment. Whenever he's talking about sharing with ascetics and Brahmins, who are the people who are helping you to be able to grow and develop in this life, he's typically talking about practicing where people are virtuous, right? He's never just talking about haphazardly making offerings to any old ordained practitioner or any old teacher in the world. Here, he's talking about those people who refrain from intoxication and heedlessness, who are settled in patience and gentleness, who tame the mind, calm the mind, and train the mind for enlightenment or nibbana, right? He's specifically helping you to understand how to practice discernment. Whereas if you were to just haphazardly make offerings to people, you don't know what you're supporting. Those people could be gambling, they could be using drugs and alcohol, they could be doing any kind of number of things. They could be indulging in material possessions for themselves. So you need to be able to always be practicing discernment in all aspects of your life, including your generosity. Every single part of the teachings of the Buddha is based in discernment, including your practice of generosity. You would like to make sure you're making wise decisions about who to share with, not judging them and looking down on them, but making sure that your generosity is going to be used in a good way, in a wholesome way. That's what the Buddha is talking about here, is properly allocating your resources where it's going to have the most benefit. And that's ultimately what he's sharing. And these 4 different groups are the prioritization of how you can now share your resources. So let me know what questions you guys have here by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or by raising your hand in Zoom and asking any questions that you like. Yes, Yusuf, you have a question?
Good evening, David.
Hey, good evening, Yusuf.
I think my internet connection is a little bit weak, so I will try to ask. I actually have a couple of questions about generosity, about like maybe this course and like in general. Is it fine to ask about the general ones also?
Yeah, if it's about generosity, go for it.
Yeah. So let me start with this one. So here he mentioned in this book, it's mentioned to deities like gods. So like after you die, there could be some people who will only read the book without necessarily seeing your videos. So why didn't you delete this deities thing if you don't believe that the Buddha would say such a thing? Isn't like you say that it would be wise to read your translations, not the other monks' translations, because it could be affected by their mind?
Yeah, I wouldn't actually delete things that are here as part of translations from the Pali Canon, but instead, down here, I would explain it. Right? Down here, I'm going to explain in the, so that people have it right here.
Yeah, good. Also,
you can see right here. Do you see this, Yusuf? Where it says, I suggest one could disregard any interest to share one's wealth with deities, as there are many other wholesome uses that would provide more wholesome results, right? So I talk about how Gotama Buddha wouldn't have taught this kind of thing, but I'm not going to contribute to the impermanence of the Pali Canon by choosing to delete things that are here. This is what we're working with. This is what's been given to us from the elders. And now I might enhance it in terms of like better word choices, but I'm not going to delete something that is reportedly to have come from the Pali Canon.
Yeah, that's enough. That's wise from you. I also have a question regarding my mom. So sometimes, like when mom asks me to take her a place that is far away, I ask her if it's fine to give me money for what I am doing here. And she sometimes says yes, or sometimes she offers money to me without me asking for anything. But in both situations, when mother gives me money, like her face expressions and her voice and everything related to her is someone about to cry. Like even if she gives me the least amount of money, she looks like someone who is about to cry. Like even when she tried to hand me the money, she is hesitating to do so, and she looks about to cry and this kind of stuff. So I just don't take it from her, even if she said yes, because I will feel like sad. Someone is about to cry because he's about to give me money. So should I like worry about what she feels, or I should just take it because she said yes? So there is the yes from her, and there is her expressions and the way she speaks and the way she hands me money. All this are mixed to me.
Yeah, you worrying and being sad because of what your mom is experiencing, that's your attachment to your mom. And you would like to get rid of that. You would like to eliminate that through the contemplation of death, which you've heard me teach before. What I would suggest you do in these situations is you actually accept the money from her, because that's helping her to practice generosity, is training her mind to let go of her money. That's why she's having those facial expressions, that she's holding on to the money really tight. So her having the action of giving it to you is actually training her mind to let it go. But now, if this is something that you're not interested in keeping, you just wait a few hours or a few days, and then you go and you give it back to her. Now you say, Mom, I would like to practice some generosity with you. I'm not attached to this money, and I don't need to hold on to it and cling to it. I would like to give it to you. And this is for you for being such a great, wonderful mom to me. Here you go, right? And now you practice generosity with her, and you're showing her that it's okay to let go of this money. And you can do this a number of times, where each time she's giving you money, you could potentially give it back to her, or you could use that money to go buy her a gift and then give her that gift, like food or clothing, shelter, thing like this, medical care, because it still allows her mind to let go. Because that's the problem that she's experiencing, is that her mind is holding on. And by you just saying, no, Mom, I don't need your money, you keep it, it's not allowing her mind to let go. So I would encourage you to do it this way.
Okay, great. There is also me hesitating to give money to people like in my country. In my country, it's known that there are gangs that rent people to, I don't know the word, like beg for money, you call it, this thing. So I kind of hesitate to give them money, because when I try to give money to people like I don't know, I try to give it to the people that are like need the money, that are poor, but I actually don't know any poor guy to give it to them. So what do you think here?
So if you're going to offer money to somebody, it's important that you send it in a direction that you know it's going to be used for beneficial purposes. If you see somebody that is homeless, that is lacking food and clothing and shelter and medical care, I would encourage you, if you're going to practice generosity with those people, that you give them those things, because then you know that it's being used for food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, rather than give them money. That's what I do. If I see somebody on the street, I would give them food, clothing, shelter, medical care, rather than money itself, because that's more liquid and they can do any number of different things with it. You need to train in order to eliminate your craving to money. If you're clinging and holding on to money, you need to train to let that go. But who you choose to give it to is a choice that you need to base in discernment. And just giving it to any old person isn't wise. So you would like to find a place that is going to be utilized to the best of its ability. But you can still practice generosity with this other group of people if you would like, but just do it in a way that I would recommend that is not cash, but instead is a material object that they can then use, and you know that it's been used for that purpose. Okay, I think we.
So this gangs things, I think it's found in every. You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Your internet cut out for a little bit.
You can hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. So this gangs things, I think it is found in every country. So I think that what I am thinking is a little bit off. Therefore, I am asking you, like, is there anything unwholesome in me deciding to never give money to people in the streets because I don't think they would be poor? So instead, I give it only to the people that I'm 100% sure they are poor.
Couple of things here, Yusuf. Do you really think that gangs exist in every single country?
Yeah.
Okay. Wouldn't that be permanence if that was the case? Are you not understanding the universal truth of impermanence? The universal truth of impermanence tells us that there's not gangs in every single country.
Well, yeah, it would be permanence, right? But there are 8 billion people in the world. So there, of course, in every country, there would be like 1 or 2 or more. I don't see it like there would be none in a single country. I think it would be impossible.
Yes, there are countries that don't have these gangs that you're talking about. The universal truth of impermanence tells us that.
How would you know?
Because the universal truth of impermanence, we can see that to be the case.
Okay. You think it would be a good way to give the money if I am hesitating to give it to people in my country because of the gangs? Do you think it would be like a wise decision to give it to people who work in places like as tips? That would be like a fine way to replace the giving to people in streets.
If you're looking to practice generosity to train your mind to let go of the craving for money, you're going to need to find ways to do that within the environment that you're in. I can't tell you exactly because I don't know the environment that you're in. That's where you need to apply your wisdom to be able to see where can you practice discernment, wise decision making towards giving money to people that it's going to be used for a good purpose. And the Buddha is giving you the guidance here to be able to understand how to do that. And you're going to need to apply that wisdom in your day-to-day life. I can't tell you exactly because I'm not in your environment.
Yeah, okay. So there is nothing like off in me thinking that giving to people in the streets something that I wouldn't do. It's fine, fine. No unwholesome thoughts here, right?
It doesn't sound like it, but that's what you've got to look at. I can't be inside your mind and tell you 100%. That's where you've got to look at that. That's where I've been teaching you for many years, Yusuf. Now, you always tend to try to get me to make decisions for you or for me to tell you things for yourself, but you won't get to enlightenment that way. You need to be able to cultivate the wisdom to look inward for yourself to see if there's any unwholesome thoughts there. That are you having any craving, anger, and ignorance? Are you having aversion? Are you pushing things away? You need to be able to see these things for yourself. I can guide you to be able to understand what these things are, but whether you have any unwholesome thoughts in your mind or not, only you can determine that. Nobody else can.
Yeah, I still have fear to not follow the teachings as rules and commandments. Therefore, asking you these questions would help to let it go, that the mind will see that, yeah, there's no rules or commandments here. You can do this way or that way. Okay?
That is following as a rule or a commandment. That's getting me to tell you what is the rule here, what is the commandment. You need to be able to be the wise individual who looks at your own mind and comes up with the answer. I can explain to you what these things are, but then you need to learn them and look at your mind. That's the cultivation of wisdom that your mind needs to experience.
Okay, so my last question would be about something related to generosity in politics, because I'm interested in politics, and I think the Buddha mentioned gave advices to kings or the politicians in the teachings. So I don't know what we call it, like the one on the head of the country. What do you call it?
The prime minister or
like
president?
Trump in America. Mm-hmm. What do you call that?
The president or prime minister?
Yeah, mm-hmm. This thing. So the president. So our president gave some things as generosity to other countries, where we need it in our country. Like our country would be considered as a very poor country. So our people would need the thing that he gave to another country more. Like we are his people, you know. As we say, charity begins at home. So he did give it to another country instead of us. So would that be like an unwise action? By the way, like the people in our country got mad so much because he gave to other countries instead of giving to his country. Would you think that what he did is unwise? Like his people need the thing instead of other countries?
I would never comment on somebody else's actions or someone else's decisions like that, because that individual has their own reasons for doing that. If that person asked me if their decisions were wise or unwise, I would talk to that person and help them to be able to see the thoughts on this, but I would need to understand more from them. But I wouldn't talk to you about somebody else's decisions, because that would be gossip and slander of me if I were to say those kinds of things. So the reason why the people in your country are upset is because they have certain cravings and expectations of the prime minister, of the president, and that person didn't meet those. So all of those people are causing their own discontentedness. Whether the president or prime minister made a wise or unwise decision, that's between that person to decide. And if they ever came to me for advice and guidance, I would help them, but I wouldn't talk to a third person about somebody else's decisions. Okay, I think that's it, right, Yusuf?
Well, I didn't catch everything you said due to the weakness of the internet. I can watch it on the replay.
Okay, sounds good.
It would be yes, because the internet is weak. You can't hear me.
Okay, I'm going to go to Vibhav, who's the next student.
Do you think I can read, or my voice is so unhearable?
Let's come back to you. I think it's possible. Yep. Okay, Vibhav.
Hey, David, I had just a question on generosity. So yesterday, or it was just or day before yesterday, basically I had some stuff in the garage that I was giving away, and I put it on an app called Buy Nothing, and there was this gentleman who came over and he took those things away. But then he offered me, like, I guess he was appreciative of my generosity, but he offered me a bottle of liquor as from his like as generosity to me, and I refused that. I tell him that I don't take alcohol, and I don't serve alcohol, and I have stuff like that. So I didn't take that bottle of liquor. And I think that was the right thing to do. But do you think I could have taken that and then thrown it away, or to accept the generosity, or
In those situations, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, should I just have taken it and thrown it away, or something like that, or just like not just saying sorry, I just don't accept alcohol as a good thing to do.
It's best to do what you did, because then it helps the people around you to understand if they're going to practice generosity with you, the type of generosity that you accept. Obviously, the Buddha teaches to accept what is given, but if someone's giving you something like that, substances that cause heedlessness, that's not something you would accept. The Buddha wouldn't accept those kinds of things either if somebody was going to try to give it to them. So it's best to do what you did and do that in a polite and respectful way, where you might preface it with, I really appreciate your generosity. That's so kind of you to think of me and be willing to share with me. And then add the piece where whatever you said is, I don't, ingest these substances, or however you said it. But if you preface it with the appreciation, that's usually nice, because if they have a craving to practice generosity with you, when you say no, they can experience painful feelings. And of course, their mind's causing it themselves, but you would like to try to preface it with the appreciation if you can, and that'll kind of soften the blow with them a little bit. And even when you do that, they can still get upset, they can still get angry, but it's less likely that they will if you're able to do that part.
Okay, I did it after the fact, not before. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I did say, I'm sorry, I couldn't take it. I just don't. I appreciate the notion, but I can take it. But I kind of did it after the fact, not when you first gave it.
Yeah, I would recommend doing it first, because that'll kind of soften it up a little bit, and then you can even do it afterwards too. You can do it a couple times. It's always nice to add in appreciation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, so now we're going to move on to this next chapter. This is chapter 17, and it looks like Yusuf's internet gave up. So, Vibhav, I see you're there. Would you like to read this one?
Sure.
Okay.
Wealth being used properly goes to utilization, not to waste. But, great king, when a wholesome man gains abundant wealth, he makes himself peaceful and pleased, and he makes his mother and father peaceful and pleased, and his wife and children, and his slaves, workers and servants, and his friends and colleagues. And he establishes an offering for ascetics and Brahmins, one leading upwards, of heavenly fruit, resulting in peacefulness, conducive to heaven. Because his wealth is being used properly, kings do not take it away, thieves do not take it away, fire does not burn it, water does not carry it away, and displeased heirs do not take it. Such being the case, great king, that wealth being used properly goes to utilization, not to waste. Suppose, great king, not far from a village or a town, there was a lotus pond with clear, cool, sweet, clean water, with good crossings, delightful, and people would take the water and drink it, and bathe in it, and use it for their purposes. In such a case, great king, that water being used properly would go to utilization, not to waste. So too, great king, when an wholesome man gains abundant wealth, he makes himself peaceful and pleased, and he makes his mother and father peaceful and pleased, and his wife and children, and his slaves, workers and servants, and his friends and colleagues, and he establishes an offering for ascetics and Brahmins, one leading upwards, of heavenly fruit, resulting in peacefulness, conducive to heaven. Because his wealth is being used properly, kings do not take it away, thieves do not take it away, fire does not burn it, water does not carry it away, and displeased heirs do not take it. Such being the case, great king, that wealth being used properly goes to utilization, not to waste.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So this is a kind of elaboration of the discourse that we just read, where it kind of gives more full content about all these things that the Buddha was talking about. So I don't know that we need to go through this because it's all the same stuff that we were just talking about. But let me know if you guys have any questions on this.
There was just a comment. I think it's missing a period at the end of the discourse, like the last waste.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Vibhav. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so let's go to chapter 18. And here, would somebody like to read this one? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
4 things leading to welfare and peacefulness in future lives. There are, Bhayapaja, these 4 other things that lead to a householder's welfare and peacefulness in future lives. What 4? Accomplishment and confidence, accomplishment and virtuous behavior, accomplishment and generosity, and accomplishment and wisdom. And what is accomplishment and confidence? Here, a householder is endowed with confidence. He places confidence in the enlightenment of the Tathagata thus. The perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the fortunate one, the perfectly enlightened one. This is called accomplishment and confidence. And what is accomplishment and virtuous behavior? Here, a householder abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. This is called accomplishment and virtuous behavior. And what is accomplishment and generosity? Here, a householder resides at home, with a mind free of the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, one devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment and generosity. And what is accomplishment and wisdom? Here, a householder is wise. He possesses the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. This is called accomplishment and wisdom. These are the four other things that lead to the welfare and peacefulness of a householder in future lives.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So the same things that lead to peacefulness and welfare in future lives are the same things that lead to welfare and peacefulness in this life too, right? So you'd like to be able to learn and understand what these four things are, because by growing and developing these and practicing accomplishment in confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom, you're going to be able to make your way to welfare and peacefulness in this life. And that's the ultimate goal. But remember, the Buddha was typically talking about future lives with household practitioners because the rarity of a household practitioner even having the ability to be able to make their way to enlightenment due to lack of time and ability to focus on training in the teachings. So this confidence, anytime you see that, the Buddha's talking about confidence in him, the teachings, and the community. Here, he's just focusing on confidence mainly in him, right? But that's always what he's talking about, because you need that confidence to be able to have confidence that enlightenment even exists and that he was able to help people to be able to get to enlightenment. Then there needs to be this accomplishment in virtuous behavior where you're practicing essentially the 5 precepts. That's essentially what these are. At least the Buddha is talking here about not killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and taking substances that cause heedlessness. If you can get to the point where you're practicing those, you will significantly reduce your unwholesome Kamma production. You won't eliminate it with the 5 precepts, but you'll significantly reduce it. And this is going to help ensure that you're moving closer and closer to enlightenment. So getting to the point where you've been practicing the 5 precepts for an extended period of time would be accomplishment in virtuous behavior. And this is going to help you to get rid of that fetter of wrong behavior and observances. And underlying all of this is that it's helping you eliminate the pollution of the mind. Because in order to be able to practice these precepts, you're going to need to be able to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind. And that's ultimately going to help you get closer and closer to enlightenment. Then there's this accomplishment in generosity. You're going to need this as well in order to be able to make your way on the path to enlightenment, where you're giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, in order to be able to train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, that stain of selfishness that the Buddha talks about. Then the accomplishment of wisdom, that you're growing and developing on the path, that you're learning, examining, and investigating teachings. You're then reflecting on them to independently verify them, and you're practicing them, integrating them into your day-to-day life. This is what's ultimately going to help you eliminate the fetter of ignorance. So each one of these accomplishments here is actually helping you get to the first stage of enlightenment. So the accomplishment in confidence, this is going to help you to eliminate doubt, that second fetter, that second pollution, right? The accomplishment in virtuous behavior is going to help you to eliminate the wrong behavior. And of course, there's wrong observances as well. This accomplishment in generosity, the Buddha actually calls this out at a particular time in his discourses where he says you'd have to practice this even to get to the first stage of enlightenment, and then practicing the accomplishment of wisdom as well. So these are 4 aspects that you would need to develop in order to be able to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. It's not the only things that you would need, but they're part of what you would need to be able to make your way to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular discourse, these 4 qualities to be able to practice that leads to peacefulness and welfare. Looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. This is just a general question. The phrase, taking what is not given, is it okay to ask for something, say to ask for money or for clothing or for food? Or should one wait for it to be offered? Or does that just mean if someone says no or I can't or whatever, and you take it anyway, is that what it's referring to?
Which one are you talking about under virtuous behavior, where it's taking what is not given?
Yes.
Okay. So this is pointing to the precept, the second precept, where he's just giving the first part of taking what is not given. That's like stealing, right? But then also assuming that something could be used. But when you look at the precept in detail, which the Buddha is not giving the full precept here, but he's pointing to it, he does talk about awaiting what is given, that you don't put expectations on people and ask people for things unless you truly need it, right? Like there was a situation many years ago where I was moving a motorbike from our house here in Chiang Mai to Bangkok, and I needed to take this motorbike to Bangkok, and I needed to load it up in the back of my wife's truck. And there was nobody around, like nobody here at our house. My brothers were not here and all that kind of stuff. So I just went to my neighbor and I said, would it be possible for you to help me with this? And he said, yes, of course, right? Because people know that you're not going to ask for help unless you truly need it. Because I needed to leave in like 30 minutes to be able to leave. So he was like, yes, of course, I'll help you. So he helped me. So it's not that you can never ask for something, but it's that you wouldn't be interested in burdening people with certain obligations and expectations. Because remember, it's never always do it this way or never do it this way. These are like absolutes. You would like to be able to understand this middle way that the Buddha is talking about. Of course, you're never interested in taking substances that cause heedlessness, right? And going back to what Vibhav said, it's always wise to not accept offerings that are based in substances that cause heedlessness. There's these types of things that you do learn as part of the path, but there's like this large gray area too that you need to be able to learn how to navigate. That where the Buddha teaches you to await what is given, that's generally what you would like to be practicing. But there's going to be those rare situations where you need to ask, but you would only do that if you absolutely need help, and there's no other option for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, Yusuf has asked a question in chat, and he's also got his hand up. So let's see what Yusuf has to say.
My question in chat is different about this one. This one is continuing about what the lady said. My mind is a little bit conditioned regarding asking people to do me something. So here you just said that you can do it if you really need the help. So sometimes I don't really need the help, but it is gonna like help me because maybe I don't have that big time or I'm just a little bit tired. So like one example would be that in my country, people expect their wives to be like kind of a slave, I think the word would be. Like she would wake up in the morning and she would cook and clean and all this kind of stuff. And this would be like an expectation, something unwise. But is asking her like from time to time, like let's say like a lot of times to maybe cook me dinner or to do me certain things, or like I'm tired, I can't do that, can you please help me, or can you massage my back, and all this kind of stuff. This is like not really needed, but it would offer help to me. So would that be fine?
So this is where if you ask a lot of times, that eventually, it's the mind, just constantly asking, and now the people are overburdened with their own work to sustain their life, and now you're putting this on top of them. This is coming from your own craving. So if you're able to restrain your mind and be more self-sufficient, this is going to be more helpful for the liberation of your mind, and you're not going to be able to burden other people with certain things that you're wanting them to do. But you need to find the middle way with these kinds of things, right? Because you could go to your life partner and say things like, would it be possible for you to cook some dinner? And now if they say, no, it's not possible, okay, no worries, I'll do it myself, right? And now you'll take care of it yourself. But if you requested that repeatedly over and over and over again, this is leading into your craving. This is you not being self-sufficient. This is you burdening somebody else with things that you're wanting them to do. So you need to find the middle way with these things. And it's only you that can be able to see where that is for you in any given situation and relationship.
So even if she says yes, she can do that, it would be putting burden on her, even if she says yes, to do it a lot of times.
If you're doing it regularly, and frequently over and over and over again, yeah, you're putting this burden on the other person, right? Because if they would like to cook and they're interested in cooking for you, they would have done it themselves. That's a choice that they would have made. So you need to be able to temper that so that you're not constantly asking people for things. So like when I was in business, and if I would go to my employees and ask them repeatedly to do things constantly, eventually they're going to tune you out, right? But that's not the way that I managed my companies. That when I asked my employees to do something, boom, they would typically do it right away because they knew that the boss rarely asked them to do anything. So as soon as I asked them, they were right on top of it. They would handle it. So this is the way you would like to function so that you're largely self-sufficient, that you're not functioning through craving, just constantly asking people to do things. But then when you do need to ask people something, that they're more than willing to help you because they know that you rarely ask for help. And when you do, you really need that help.
Okay, understood. And I also would like to read, if it's fine by you. I think the internet connection is getting better now.
Okay, Yusuf, let me answer your question here in the chat. Teacher, I'm not sure if I gave an answer to my last question regarding the president. If you don't mind, you can answer it imagining me being the president, doing that action and asking you to understand if it was wise or unwise so that it wouldn't consider as slander and it will watch it on the replay. Yusuf, whether it's wise or unwise to give in that particular situation with that particular president, there's multiple things that would need to be discussed in order to come to that conclusion. You can't look at it from the outside in and just say that it was either wise or unwise to give money to someone outside of the country. And I wouldn't discuss it with you kind of circumventing this natural law of Gama, even though you can't do that. Because if this person is interested to know whether it's wise or unwise, I would need to ask them a bunch of questions. Even you, if you said, David, I would like to give money to a person living in Italy. Is that wise or unwise? I wouldn't be able to give you an answer to that. I would need to say, well, why is it that you're interested in giving them money? Are there any other situations where you could potentially give money? We need to ask many different things to be able to come to that conclusion. So you can't just look from the outside in and look at what your president has done and say that it was 100% wise or unwise because you don't know all the details and all the variables that the president knows. And it would be unwise for me to even indulge in that kind of conversation with you because ultimately it would be slander and it would be gossip and I wouldn't be interested in doing that. Okay, it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
David, there was another situation on the university that happened like maybe a month ago. So we had a party at a home for Diwali, and then I think it was like a potluck. So we asked people to bring their own food, but we didn't specify that it should be vegetarian. It was kind of my assumption, or maybe wrong assumption, that people just would bring vegetarian food. But there was one person who did bring like a chicken dish, and it was on the table, and they opened it, and I didn't know that would be a chicken dish. So at that point, I decided to accept it and not take it out. So I would like cause any commotion or stuff like that. So was that a wise thing to do, or accept it and leave it for us to eat, or should I have requested not to take that dish?
Yeah. So in this situation, the only way that you're experiencing unwholesome karma is if you chose to eat the chicken, right? This person who practiced generosity by bringing the chicken dish, they're enhancing the quality of their mind, so they're experiencing wholesome karma. The people who choose to eat the meat, they're the ones who are going to experience the unwholesome karma in that situation, not you. So you just choosing to allow this person to practice generosity and put this chicken dish on the table, that's not producing any unwholesome karma for you because you're not choosing to eat the chicken. So that was what I would do in that situation too, is the same thing that you've done.
Okay, but am I not accepting like meat dish in my house.
It's not about whether you accept it in your house. It's about what you choose to ingest. That's where the unwholesome karma is coming from.
Okay.
So it's an individual choice. It's not just about having it in your house.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But then how is that slightly different from like maybe accepting a bottle of liquor but not drinking it, giving it to, or like having the other case could be that, somebody bought a bottle of wine, like the gentleman gave the bottle of wine. I keep it, and like other people who, when the guests come to and they drink that bottle of wine.
Yeah.
I'm still not ingesting that alcohol, but I'm still kind of doing some kind of trade with it, right? That I'm taking, somebody's giving it and I'm serving it to somebody else.
Yeah, so if you accepting substances that cause heedlessness, that's being offered directly to you. And now you're accepting that. And now this person gets used to, even though you're probably not going to see them again, this person gets used to you accepting substances that cause heedlessness. Now, if you're giving the substances that cause heedlessness to other people and serving that in your home, now the people in your home are getting drunk, and now you're going to have to experience the intoxication of the people in your home. And now there's all kinds of unwise decisions that can happen from that. A meat dish is something different than that. You're not directly accepting it for yourself. It's being placed on this table for individuals to choose if they would like to eat it or not. And by them eating the chicken, it's not actually producing heedlessness in that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, let me get to this. Let me actually just check one thing. I don't see. Oh, here's some questions in YouTube. Let me see what we've got here. One moment. Just got to expand my screen here. Okay. For substances that cause heedlessness, should we strive for full elimination? For example, if just drinking socially, eliminate alcohol. You would need to eliminate 100% of alcohol in order to be able to even get to the first stage of enlightenment, because alcohol or any kind of substance that causes heedlessness, it's producing a lack of mindfulness or unawareness or unattentiveness. In order for you to be able to train your mind, you need to cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind. So and a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment and beyond, they're not going to be drinking any alcohol whatsoever or any substance that causes heedlessness, because they understand that that produces unwholesome results for them. And it's taking them in the opposite direction of enlightenment to be able to cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind, to then be able to train your mind skillfully. So your goal would be to completely eliminate all substances 100%. That's what's going to help you to be able to cultivate your mind, develop mindfulness, because that mindfulness is now going to help you to be able to eliminate other unwholesome qualities like anger and frustration and agitation. You'll never get to enlightenment or even the first stage of enlightenment by continuing to ingest substances. So that's what you would like to be able to do with those, is completely eliminate them 100%. The same person is asking another question: how to make room for generosity, charity, when you do not have much wealth? Generosity is giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. So it's not just your money. It can be your time. Like, say you're walking out of your house and you notice the trash for your neighbor has been blown all over the yard. You can take 3 minutes, 5 minutes and pick up the trash, tuck it away, and this is generosity. Or you're walking into a store and you're noticing there's some people behind you. You could open the door and hold it for them as they walk into the store. So these kinds of things don't actually cost you anything, right? You can also practice generosity in small increments, because it's not the amount, it's about the frequency of your generosity. So let's just say you are only able to afford, say, $10 a month to be able to give to other people. Well, you would like to break that up into 50 cents or $1 per donation, so that now you can more frequently let go. Like maybe these donation boxes that you see around in different stores, you put 50 cents or $1 in each one over the course of the month. And now your mind's having to let go. So it's not the amount of generosity that's going to be impactful. It's the frequency that you're doing. So you would like to be practicing generosity daily. And with that, it's going to be your time, effort, energy, and resources, not just money itself. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So looks like Yusuf, you are up for reading. There you go, sir.
Okay. Offering for the, you can hear me, right?
I can.
Offering for the heavenly beings. The fortunate one gave thanks thus to Sanidaha and Vasakara, the chief ministers of Magadha, after he had finished eating his meal in these verses. In whatever realm the wise man makes his home, he should feed the virtuous leaders of the whole life. Whatever heavenly beings there are who reward this offering, they will pay him respect and honor for this. They tremble for him as a mother for her son, and he for whom heavenly beings tremble ever happiest.
Okay, thank you, Yusuf. So what the Buddha is talking about here is that heavenly beings respect those who practice generosity, right? That these heavenly beings, oftentimes people think about them being in really far distant worlds somewhere, but they're all here in the same time and space as everybody else. In all of these 5 realms, whether it's hell, of course, the animal realm, the afflicted spirits, which are ghosts, human realm, and these heavenly realm, all these beings are all in the same time and space. So these heavenly beings can actually hear us speaking right now. And if they're choosing to learn the teachings, they can choose to learn the teachings and practice those teachings. So heavenly beings, they're aware of people practicing generosity. And the Buddha is saying that these individuals respect those who practice generosity. So that's what's being shared here. Let me know if you guys have questions on this chapter. Okay. You're welcome on YouTube. I think that's Cameron. You're welcome. Pleased to help you. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now there's this last one for today, which is chapter 20. Would somebody like to read this? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
Without having abandoned selfishness, one is incapable of realizing the fruit of arahantship. Monks, without having abandoned these 5 things, one is incapable of entering and residing in the first jhana, and the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. One is incapable of realizing the fruit of stream enterer, the fruit of once returner, the fruit of non-returner, the fruit of arahantship. What 5? Selfishness with regard to dwellings, selfishness with regard to families, selfishness with regard to material possessions, selfishness with regard to praise, and selfishness with regard to the teachings. Monks, having abandoned these 5 things, one is capable of entering and residing in the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. One is capable of realizing the fruit of stream enterer, the fruit of once returner, the fruit of non-returner, the fruit of arahantship. What 5? Selfishness with regard to dwellings, selfishness with regard to families, selfishness with regard to material possessions, selfishness with regard to praise, and selfishness with regard to the teachings. Having abandoned these 5 things, one is capable of realizing the fruit of arahantship.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So these are 5 things that one would need to be able to practice in order to be able to even get to the first jhana. Remember, these jhanas are enhanced qualities of mind that you're cultivating and that you will have developed on your way to the first stage of enlightenment. These are 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. So even just to get to the first jhana, the Buddha is saying you need to practice these things. These are all based in generosity. Selfishness in regard to dwellings, you would need to eliminate that you're willing to share your home with other beings, right? Like it might be different friends or people like this, that you're willing to share your home, because oftentimes the mind can be possessive of that. And because of craving, desire, attachment, you're unwilling to actually share with other beings. Then there's selfishness with regards to families. This is that you're willing to share with your family, that you're willing to share food and your home and different resources and things of this nature. Selfishness in regards to material possessions. Any kind of material possessions, you need to be willing to share that with other people. And remember, you're always doing this from the middle way because you need to be able to make sure you have the resources that you need in order to be able to sustain your life. But you're going to need to be willing to share with others, that it's not, I'll do this for you and you do that for me. It's no, I'm willing to share this without any expectation of anything in return. Selfishness in regard to praise is that you're willing to share with people when they've done things wisely, right? And that you can praise people and that you're not holding that back, that you're willing to do that. You need to temper this, because if you were to constantly praise people, this is going to feed their ego and you would be disinterested in being around that. So you need to be able to be sure that you temper your praise, that you're not selfish with it, but you're also not doing it excessively either. Remember, it's always from the middle way. Even when you're praising people, you would like to do it from the middle way. And then selfishness in regards to the teachings, this is that you're not hiding the teachings, that you're willing to share them with other people. It doesn't mean that you go out and actively look to share with other people. But if somebody asks you like, hey, I think you learned those teachings of the Buddha, what does he teach about speech, or what does he teach about meditation, that you'd be willing to share with people, that you're not holding back and that you're not selfishly clinging to these things, that you're willing to share what it is that you know about the teachings with other people. So these are the 5 things that an individual will be more than willing to share, and they would have eliminated their selfishness in regard to dwellings, families, material possessions, praise, and in regards to the teachings, in order to even get to the first stage of enlightenment, right? But here, even to the first jhana, you would need to be able to do this, right? So we oftentimes focus on what it takes to get to that first stage of enlightenment. But here, the Buddha is talking about even just to get to the jhanas, you would need to be able to practice this generosity in this nature. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to end like I typically do by just thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters, which is going to be chapters 21 through 30. You can read these before class if you like. That's going to help you to get more benefit. And you could also read them after, before or after. It's up to you, but it would help you to be able to glean the most insight by learning what's in the books, because I don't have time to cover everything that I share in the books. So by learning the books and coming to class, you actually get the most benefit. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 20 of this first book. This is titled Animal to Human, the Evolution of Our Consciousness. This is where I introduce students to the cycle of rebirth, the 5 realms of existence, but also we talk about this evolution of the consciousness from the animal realm into the human realm, because that's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is you're shedding these animalistic instincts, becoming a better and better human being. So I'm going to be discussing that tomorrow. This week coming up, I'm going to be starting and experiencing the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment course, Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. And then now on Sundays, we have meditation in the main hall at the temple. So you guys are more than welcome to join any of those opportunities. And I live stream all of these things, and they're recorded, so you could benefit from them that way as well. So thank you all for reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for just participating in the class. It was nice to share the teachings of the Buddha with you. Whatever you choose to do today, have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee ka.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.